Well, we can speak to Todd Belt, Professor and Director of Political Management Program at George Washington University. Hello to you, Professor. Thank you for joining Paris Direct. A military parade on a president's birthday, anti-government protests, and a political assassination all on the same day. A very, very unusual day for American democracy.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. Boy, this is really a study in contrasts and a study in how two sides are really looking at their country right now. I mean, if you look at the president and he wants to make America great again and spending $45 million on a parade where they had to lay down steel plates so he could see the tanks that he wanted. He wanted to do this back in 2018 after he went to the Bastille Day parade, and they told him it would cost too much. They were estimating $90 million back then. But still, he got his parade on his birthday and the anniversary of the forming of the U.S. Army. And then, you have on the other side, for a lot of the protesters, there's a darkness at the heart of this exercise that runs cold and runs deep. I mean, this is a slide towards authoritarianism. Just yesterday and Friday night, actually overnight, there were Marines used in ICE raids. And this is a violation of the Posse Comitatus statute that says the military cannot be used in policing. And for a lot of people, this is authoritarianism. This is what kings do, and this is why we fought our Revolutionary War. And so you have both sides really digging in on this.
And let's start with the parade. Just for our international viewers, can you explain why Americans would find something like that so unusual? Here in France, as you pointed out, it's common, it's annual Bastille Day parade. But for Americans like you and I, we're not used to it. So first of all, why is that unusual? And could it have been perhaps fine if it just wasn't on his birthday?
Well, that's a real great question. I mean, if you look at this, in the United States, we have had what we call the separation of the civilian control of the military. And we also have our divided powers constitutionally because we fought a Revolutionary War and because the framers of the Constitution were so skeptical of giving too much power to an executive, because remember, they were fighting against George III, and they thought, he had too much power, and he was using the armies to round up people and to oppress people. They gave the authority to declare war to Congress. They also gave the authority to fund, raise, and train the armies and navies to Congress. And that's why we have the Congressional Medal of Honor and not the Executive Medal of Honor here in the United States. But of course, there had to be one person to control the armies, and that, of course, is the commander-in-chief. So separation of these is really ingrained in the U.S., and separating our military from civilian rule and politics. You're not supposed to do anything in politics, anything political, if you are in your military uniform. And the other thing you asked about Donald Trump, if this was not on his birthday, would it be different? It might. Our last parade was after the first Gulf War in the early 1990s. So it's been over 30 years since we have one. And this is not celebrating a military victory. This is just celebrating two birthdays, the birthday of the Army and the birthday of the president. And so if it weren't on his birthday and if he weren't so forceful about it, it might be different. Maybe if this was on July 4th, when we have the big fireworks show in D.C., then it might be a bit different.
I'm also curious about the tone of it all, because as you point out, at the end of the Gulf War, we're bringing our troops home. The timing of this here, the National Guard is deployed in California, and there are some really startling images coming out there. And the governor of California says Trump is just trying to create a spectacle.
That's right. I mean, for a lot of people, this looks like the Reichstag fire in 1933, that they're trying to use these videos. You saw Caroline Lambert, the press secretary, with pictures of cars on fire behind her in the White House, saying this is why we have to have all of this military control, and this is why we have to move in this direction, because the governor is not doing it himself, whereas the governor is arguing everything was under control, and they were highlighting just a few specific acts, and that the police were actually protecting the National Guard out there. But National Guard troops, when they are used in the United States, can be used usually in a support capacity. But the real clear violation is the use of those 700 Marines in ICE raids that's going on right now. That is strictly forbidden. The Posse Comitatus Act can be suspended under the Insurrection Act, but there has to be an act of rebellion against the authority of the United States. And that, it's really hard to claim that that's exactly what's happening.
No, we hear that time and again with some of these initiatives that the administration has taken, that they don't have the authority to do this, they don't have the authorization to do it. But who can hold them to account? And is it just that the courts are so backlogged that at some point it might come up on the agenda, but it's so far down the line that everyone has to just turn their head and look to what's coming down next?
Well, you've really nailed this. I mean, look at the president and all of his executive orders, and so many of them that are ending up in the courts, right? So you have a flood the zone mentality here. So many things going on that it's hard for the courts to take on everything all at once and to rule on them. And then you have the other specter that is very, very concerning. That is, will the president actually obey what the courts say? I mean, they brought the detainee back from El Salvador. It took a while, but it looks like they were going to ignore the courts. And again, that is authoritarianism, when the courts are ignored by the executive branch. How can this also be changed? We're talking about members of Congress. It's controlled by Republicans. There are very thin majorities, but all of those members of Congress who are Republican in the Congress right now, they were elected because of Donald Trump. There's no more anti-Trumper Republicans. They're all gone. And Donald Trump controls his party. And until you have elections next year, there won't be a change there to try to slow down from the executive branch. So this is why you have everybody out on the streets, because they're trying to put pressure on the courts and the Congress to stand up to this, what they see as these gross violations of presidential power.
Yeah, and one of the most prominent Never Trump Republicans is now the Vice President, J.D. Vance. Real quickly, one last question. I want to be careful not to jump to conclusions here over what happened in Minnesota, but should we be linking any of this to a bigger picture about polarization and political hate in America?
Well, I think the link is there, and the way it's there is because you have Donald Trump talking about the law being the law, and, rough them up. He used to say this during his political campaigns about protesters at his rallies, and about police officers when they were taking people into custody and not protecting their heads when they get in the cars. There is this tough guy mentality that spills over, and you get vigilantism. That's the connection. And this is what really concerns me is, there are officers who, are trained in how and what to do. They may violate that, they may not, but there is a code of conduct that they have to be respectful of. But when you have common citizens saying, well, Donald Trump said this is what we need to do now, so I'm going to do it on my own, that's the real concern. And I'm not exactly sure that this is exactly how these assassination attempts in Minnesota played out, but you can see that there is a gross potential for worse civil rights violations when it's civilian on civilian rather than police on civilian.
Professor, thank you so much for your time. Todd Belt joining us from Washington. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.